On Ticker, this is Import Export with Lawrence Christophels.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. It's our second episode of the Import Export Show here on Ticker TV. My name is Lawrence Christophels from the Australian Trade and Logistics Corporation. We've had another massive week in trade. The impacts of coronavirus are really starting to freak a lot of people out in relation to getting their products out of China, the freight impacts, the whole supply chain concerns around that. We've had the BREXIT progressing now with the UK exit last week, and what are the impacts continue to sort of unfold there with the European Union and the UK's exit. We've also had the Trump acquittal, so we've got a whole range of things that may impact on some forex and market conditions there as well. And on a local front, everyone's back at work, so kids are back at school, so we're truly into the full swing of international trade and domestic business. On today's show, we've got some fantastic guests. I'm going to be joined first and foremost with Megan Edwards. Megan Edwards is a specialist in LinkedIn. She does a lot of workshops around the country around how to maximise a LinkedIn profile, how to really get the most out of that. And why that's important is that more and more so, your personal brand, your company brand, social media in general is forming more and more part of global business strategies, and helps companies with their global branding and their import-export strategies as well. So we're going to kick off and ask you to welcome Megan Edwards. So Megan, thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Long time no see. We had a great event in
Yes.
Melbourne here last night. We had a fantastic response. So again, we had so many interesting diverse questions around what they should be doing with LinkedIn profile. And I wanted to ask, how have you sort of coached your clients in relation to looking at LinkedIn as it is truly a global platform? And I know you had some statistics and figures last night around the scale of that, so it'd be really interesting to talk about that.
Yeah, it's an interesting platform because there's a lot of fear amongst business people that they're putting themselves out there on something like LinkedIn.
Yep.
But the reality is that we're all trading a social currency nowadays.
Yep.
And whether you're an organisation or an individual, you have to own that and you have to lean into it in order to build relationships, in order to close deals, because it's validation.
It's all that credibility piece too. I mean, the first thing I do, if I get an email from anyone overseas, you're literally looking them up on LinkedIn to see what the background is, what their experience is, are they worth your time to talk to? So I'm assuming if you're an exporter here in Australia and you want to try and tap into some global buyers overseas, they'll be doing exactly the same on their side.
They do, and you wouldn't know.
Yeah.
That's the confronting part for a lot of people, that you wouldn't know someone's looking at your profile.
Right.
But just in the same way that 10 years ago we had to scurry to get our websites established, LinkedIn's become perhaps even more important from that perspective, because people feel it's about you rather than marketing speak generally.
And what's the size? How many users are on LinkedIn globally and here in Australia?
In Australia, it's around 11 million, or just over, which is pretty reasonable considering our population. And internationally, it's 673 million.
Wow, incredible! Yeah, so it is really you have to be on there. There's no ifs or buts about it.
No, and it's escalated over the last probably 2 to 3 years, particularly around the time that Microsoft took over. It became far more commercial, and they leveraged their own experience. But also they tapped into what users were asking for from other social platforms. So
I wanted to ask Megan, so and I know we had this question in a small way at last night's event, but with your personal brand versus a company brand, how do you balance the two? What's the best type of way to maximise both on LinkedIn?
You have to start with maximising you.
Okay.
Because that's where the algorithm shows preference for your personal profile, and that's where people feel connected and want to work with you. So if you're building a presence and you start from the company side of things, it's a very slow, very uphill battle, because we want to connect person to person.
And I think that what I see, and I'm no social media guru, I'm actually learning all the time, but things like influencers, and you see this whole opportunity for them to to be the personal brand and then brands attached to them. So you see that all over Instagram and all the other social media channels, but especially the younger generation, they're really influenced, a bit of a cliche, they're influenced by these people so powerfully, and then the brands are attached. So I suppose this day and age where employees aren't typically at a role more than, I think the statistic is 4 to 5 years as an average duration now of employment. So it is more important than ever that you have your personal brand attached to your expertise in that field. And I wanted to ask you another question, is that, without notice, but what if you change careers? So many people will have they'll have a sea change and think, do you know what? I've been a corporate banker for 10 years and now I want to be a landscape gardener. So how do you, how does that work, and how do you sort of manage that sort of thing with LinkedIn?
It's really interesting, and I've been working with somebody around that at the moment who's going from food across to coaching.
Right.
So every industry. But it's really remaining true to the individual once again, irrespective of the industry you've come from or the role you're moving towards. You as a person should never change. Right. It's purely the skills surrounding that. And you just have to continue being you more than anything.
On that point itself, my whole sort of career is built around international trade, supply chain, logistics, but I'll get a number of requests outside that field. Should I be open to that? Should I be taking those? Is it hurting me with my algorithm, or is it better just to sort of accept everyone and grow the network?
You have to be very strategic, or you immediately start to diminish and water down your impact.
Right.
And you start to attract people that fundamentally you can't help.
Okay.
So unless you're going into it for fame, which most businesses are not, there's a commercial outcome in mind.
Okay.
And that's where the influencers have a different objective. But for a business person, it's about your credibility, and it's about ultimately connecting with people that you're going to have a relationship with.
Sure.
Either as a joint venture or as a client. And so connecting with everybody is a very scattergun approach.
Yeah. And in relation to international exposure, and you want to really promote yourself, your own brand, is it the right time? Obviously, we're in different time zones here in Australia to other markets. Is there a right time to try and hone in on a particular market? So if I'm a food exporter here in Melbourne, and I'm trying to target, let's say France, and I want to put posts up about me, about my product, and how we've just innovated this new product. It's great, and I want to try and work the posting time out so that I'm maximising exposure or views of certain country time zones. Is that something that people should be aware of, or does it just be any time is fine?
Any time is fine if you don't care who sees it.
Okay, yeah.
So you do need to be mindful of, well, what's the person I'm trying to reach doing at the time that I'm posting?
Sure.
Are they sleeping? Are they having their morning coffee?
Yeah.
And that's where people tend to gravitate towards before and after work, commuting times, meal breaks, things like that, because they assume, rightly or wrongly, that that's when people have more time to consume.
Yeah.
But I think the reality is, particularly now that we've well and truly landed in the digital age, that everyone's got a phone in their hands. There is no such thing as an ideal time. It's more about the time that the audience is receptive to the message, not just looking for entertainment, but receptive to what you've got to say.
And I think even more so, I think with other, let's say, platforms of social media, it is more about in your own time, whereas LinkedIn now is accepted by most businesses as part of your work or part of your career. So I know from a HR perspective, a lot of recruiters and all that sort of stuff, they're on LinkedIn all day. They're looking at candidates or looking at trends in certain sectors. So they're literally, it's part of their job to be on LinkedIn on a regular basis. But then there's professionals who are employees, and they'll say, well, okay, I want you to look at, from a sales pipeline point of view, here are some key people that we want to talk to, here's some industry sectors or clients, company details, find out who's in the company that we can approach to try and to get a foot in the door. So it is very much a different type of timing. You don't have to do it on your coffee break or on a lunch break, or it's not something that you do on the train on the way to work. It may be increasingly like a high sort of time zone, but it is really hard, even myself, when I post on LinkedIn, what time should I post? There's really no way of me knowing that.
And it comes down to, as I said, the objective. You know, who are you trying to reach, and what do you want them to do in response? What's the outcome that you're seeking? If it's just visibility, maybe it's enough to see you going through their news feed each day. But if you actually want them to respond, maybe you choose a time that they're able to digest the information.
Sure. Well, that actually, one thing you mentioned at last night's event was really opened my eyes up a lot. Was you said on a Sunday afternoon you can appeal to higher executives, sort of C-suite executives, by posting that Sunday afternoon, which totally took me by surprise.
Yeah, and yet when you think about it, most of us as either execs or business owners are using those moments in our week to recalibrate, to plan out the week ahead. You know, what am I wanting to achieve? What have I not caught up with that I want to do some reading on? And so it makes sense that you've got time then to receive a message and really ponder it, rather than just go, that was great, keep moving. Yeah,
well, it makes sense. In the sense of, if you're busy back-to-back meetings, 8 to 6 type of PM, you're not going to have a chance to even look at your LinkedIn feed. But on a weekend, you might have the paper in the morning, on a Sunday in the afternoon. You might be taking the kids out to sport or something, and you're checking out your feed and think, oh, hang on, I've got a chance to catch up on what happened this week.
Yes.
So it makes a lot of sense, and totally took me by surprise. So the other thing I wanted to ask, and I know that you do these workshops where you really hone in, so we can only sort of touch the tip of the iceberg with our dialogue this morning, but with establishing your credibility as a personal brand, are there any do's and don'ts that you should be doing on LinkedIn or shouldn't be doing?
I think first and foremost, it's just be you, as I said earlier on. Don't try to craft a LinkedIn persona that is not how you are in real life, because we can all smell a phony from a mile off these days. And just share what it is that is important to you. Be mindful that it's a professional context, but don't feel as though you have to shave off the personality in order to get your message through.
And another takeaway, which you just reminded me of from yesterday, that again I literally made a note of, is that the manners and the actual etiquette of if someone posts or responds to a post that you made or makes a comment, then you should. The analogy you used yesterday, I'd ask if you could repeat it, because it was really powerful and again quite eye-opening for me. So the point where if you've made a post and I've commented on it, then not doing anything about that can be quite strange.
Like the phone ringing, and you answer it, and then nobody speaks at the other end. Exactly, and we can all relate to that. And it feels weird. Well, it feels weird to the person who's commented on your post, and then there's silence from your end. And we're all too time poor these days to be throwing our opinions at a post and for no avail.
Because people will just they won't bother in the future if they don't feel like it's been valued or appreciated.
No, and it makes a dent in your reputation too, however small.
Great. And I think that global part as well, Megan, is that again the etiquette is really important. The sense of doing business in Asia, in markets within Asia, it's very different to do business in China, Japan, Korea, Malaysia, Indonesia. They've all got their certain nuances. And as someone who's using social media as a platform to try and expose their type of brand, personal brand and product or corporate brand into those markets, they have to be mindful of that and maintain professionalism in all cases. So it is a challenge, I think, using the 600 and something million viewers of LinkedIn. It's 11 million here in Australia is probably it's great here in Australia, but you are getting that global feed. So it's important to really be mindful of that. So it is a challenge, and I think that what we're trying to take away from today's discussion, I'm going to ask you to continue to join us for the rest of the show, Megan, if you could, because it's been great talking to you about what the impacts of social media and your personal brand is for a global business as an importer or exporter. We're going to have a break. We're going to have James King here from AFEX on foreign exchange and the current market trends, so that's really important. But love to stick around and keep going. So thanks very much. Please continue to join us after the break. We've got James King from AFEX coming up next to join the panel.
Ticker.
On Ticker, this is Import Export with Lawrence Christophels.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us again. We've just heard from Megan Edwards about the power of LinkedIn and how you can actually leverage that as part of your global branding strategy and help with your trade opportunities as well. Now we're joined by James King from AFEX, and there's so much to talk about. James, thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure, Lawrence. Great to see you again.
You too, mate. Cheers. James, I mean, we've got so much to discuss. The coronavirus, how's that currently impacting the Aussie dollar, and what do you see happening at the moment over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, sure. So we saw a fairly decent sized impact in the currency side of things. The coronavirus kicked in around sort of mid-January, and at that point in time, the Aussie dollar was trading roughly around the 69 cent level against the USD. As the month progressed, though, we saw the Aussie dollar drop towards the post-GFC lows around 66.70. Yeah. So it lost about 2.5 cents in a very short period of time. 2.5 cents might not sound like a lot, but if you put it in percentage terms, it was around about sort of 4.5%. Wow. And at the moment, prior to the coronavirus kicking in, volatility in the markets was close to a 30-year low at that point in time as well. So to see a 4% move or thereabouts, whilst volatility is so low, is actually a decent sized move. So the Aussie dollar has borne the brunt of that coronavirus pandemic, as we've seen with the way the markets moved. Yep. We have bottomed out at the moment, but it's early days, and as you sort of said there in the intro, there's still a lot for us to dissect in the weeks and months ahead as we judge the economic impact of the pandemic.
And I think, James, typically when the Aussie dollar goes down is generally good for Aussie exporters. But if so many exports that may be heading to China, then you've got a bit of a double-edged sword here. So you can't really export to the major market, taking our resource sectors and some of the agribusiness that typically would embrace that dollar drop.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is a double-edged sword, and you could probably give some insight into this as well, Lawrence, through your contacts and associations. But from the supply chain side of things, I mean, we've heard rumours there that there's ships that aren't necessarily sailing to Australia at the moment because they don't have a full cargo. So Australia as a destination is not an ideal scenario for these shipping magnates, and as a result, our export side of things, they rely on those empty ships to be able to send their product back over to China as well. So that's from a supply side, supply chain angle. But from an economic standpoint, that's going to have ramifications, of course, for Australia, but also for other parts of the world as well. And Australia does rely on other parts of the world also for the way in which it performs economically. And from a currency standpoint, the Aussie dollar performs best when the economic environment is moving ahead.
Yeah, and that's what I heard an economist yesterday, I can't remember which one it was, talking about this could really push Australia into a recession with the coronavirus. Now, it sounds pretty dire, but when you think about the supply chain practical impacts, air freight has been severely impacted because so many airlines have stopped going in and out of China. As you say, sea freight has been impacted already because carriers are either calling off vessel schedules or trying to consolidate them onto a single sailing, so you're missing a couple of sailing schedules. But importantly as well, James, is that when you look at the actual province of Wuhan, where this coronavirus has outbroken, and that basically put a ring around it, a fence around it. There's so many major manufacturing hubs that not only Australia but the globe relies on. So it's one of the biggest automotive sectors for manufacturing. So there's some really major electronic companies who produce out of Wuhan. So those global supply chain impacts are being felt now, and the longer it continues, that whole supply chain literally will start to dry up, because if there's no workers in those factories doing the work, there's nothing getting out of those factories. Yes. You've got an impact of, let's say car parts. If your car goes off the road and you send it down to a dealership to get a service done, and you've got no parts coming in for a month, it's going to have some dramatic impacts for sure.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're going to be driving around in the Corolla for a little while.
Like you said, Corolla, not Corona.
That's right.
I did see a funny post actually about the coronavirus, and I'm moving a classic car buff, so there was an old Corona full of rust, and it actually said, "Oh, coronavirus has hit here as well." But yeah, we're probably old enough to remember the old Corollas and Coronas. But
Sadly so.
but I wanted to ask about the other thing that's happened this week was the Trump acquittal and how that's maybe impacting on the markets as well.
Yeah, it's a funny story, really. I mean, it's the whole process that's undertaken there. Given the way that the two houses of Parliament there are populated by the two parties, two major parties, it was going to be very difficult for this impeachment to be able to proceed because of the Republicans having so much clout there in that particular house. So when it was acquitted there, just a couple of days ago, I mean, I guess a few of us there in the office sort of had a bit of a joke about it. It was just a bit of a PR stunt in the end because we never thought it was ever going to go anywhere. It probably hides a lot of problems with the political system. In fact, we're seeing some of those at the moment in the Australian political system as well, from a trust perspective. But from a market's perspective, it's probably calmed the market just somewhat. There was a little bit priced in of the potential of what might happen if Trump was to be impeached, but the market really hadn't. There
was no confidence that was going to happen.
It wasn't high, no. So when it happened, there was a little fanfare from the market's perspective. The market's really taking more direction from things like the coronavirus, but also just with the financial markets at the moment receiving such a boost from money flowing in from the Federal Reserve. They're the things that are really driving things at the moment.
Yeah. And James, the other one I wanted to ask you about, we had David McCready in from the British Chamber of Commerce on last Friday talking about UK's exit of the EU.
Yeah.
So the whole kick-off of Brexit. Did that have a blip on the screen at all? Did that affect the Aussie dollar or the other markets?
It did, it did. The sterling being the main currency that's impacted by what takes place in Brexit. The sterling actually started to appreciate quite considerably in the lead up. So throughout last year, post the UK elections, when Boris Johnson was re-elected, the sterling actually started to appreciate quite considerably against the US dollar and against other currencies as well. Just in January as well, we've seen that appreciation maintain, and leading up to the official exit point, which was the end of January, the sterling was remained fairly supported at that point in time. In the last couple of days, we've seen it just start to retract a little bit, the sterling. That's probably a little bit to do with the fact that we're sort of in that sort of we're sort of in that unknown period now where they've left, but we've got 11 months of them now starting to talk about what the divorce deal looks like. They've officially left, but there's no trade deal or the like that's been implemented at this point in time. Unfortunately, we've got 11 more months of us talking about it, Lawrence. So I thought we might have been having some reprieve in 2020, but not at this stage. So we're likely to see the markets ebb and flow depending on what sort of transpiring in those discussions.
Well, there are some really good things happening from what I understand with some FTAs, both with the UK and with the EU. So there's definitely some stuff going on over the next 11 months.
The interesting thing on that is that the EU doesn't necessarily have a free trade agreement with any jurisdiction out there. They've always got tariffs or quotas inbuilt into their trade agreements. So if they adopt that same philosophy with the UK, then it's not going to be the same trading arrangement that they've had previously whilst the UK was in the EU. So that's going to be something to closely watch as well, to see if there are any of those quotas, etc., inbuilt into that agreement. Yeah,
I definitely want to ask probably after the break around what countries are winners and losers out of the UK and Euro split, because you look at places like Germany and then you look at places like Greece and they've all got different types of levels of speed of their economies and different growth factors. And if you take UK out of the mix, how does that change that dynamic and the power plays of those things? So it's an interesting talk. And we were going to be joined by Mary Jardine Clark. Unfortunately, she's having technical issues this morning, so she can't join us. But I'm going to ask both of you to fill in the gap, and we're going to talk about the EU and UK exit impacts, and talk about what that means from a opportunity point of view as well for Australian businesses. But maybe if we can do that after the break, that'd be great. So what we're going to do now is just cut to a break, and I'll come back and we'll just delve a little bit deeper into the UK and European Union strategy. Great.
is Ticker. On Ticker, this is Import Export with Lawrence Christophels.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Import Export on Ticker. I'm Lawrence. I'm joined today by Megan Edwards from MWords and James King from AFEX. We're going to delve a little bit deeper into the EU-UK split and how that's impacting definitely some of the countries in those regions and how it may impact Australian business and open up some ideas of opportunities. But also from a personal brand point of view, is there a way to actually, let's say, UKify, some of the posts or anything like that to maximise or even have a little fun with some of the stuff that's happened between the Brexit. So, is there any trends that you've seen, Megan, that people have been posting about Brexit at all?
Not a trend as such.
Yep.
A few people have been the brave leaders in that
Yep.
and thrown their opinions out.
Yep.
But most of the time people are pretty reluctant to share an opinion.
Yeah, and I've noticed that as well. It's been a really mixed, it's almost split down the middle about for and against for Brexit. So it's a really hard one to when you're reading feeds and posts about where they stand, and people are pretty much, and I'm the same, I'm not going to sort of go there. It's pretty much, it is what it is, it's there, and you just got to deal with that. But James, from your perspective, we talked about the Forex impact, but do you see other countries who are still within the EU, are they going to be bigger winners and losers out of the UK leaving or departing?
It's a good question. I'm not too sure on what the right answer is to that question. But looking at the arrangement as to what it was pre and now, as we're in this honeymoon period, there was a great relationship between all the citizens of the EU, or the members of the EU, and the UK at that point in time, and from a trade perspective, they relied heavily on one another. Europe is the UK's biggest trading partner, so by them leaving the EU, they've opened up the potential there, and as we were speaking about before, about with the EU from their free trade agreements never actually being free, there might be some impacts there on UK businesses that are exporting to the mainland of Europe that haven't been considered at this point in time. So there might be some ramifications there. There might be some opportunities for other countries outside of the European zone to fill the space there of what the UK is providing. There's potential for that. So it might come from the Americas, from Australia, or from Asia, South America. Where it could come from anywhere, depending on what that eventual free trade agreement will look like.
Yeah, and there's a number of countries already sort of scrambling to get a piece of that action, if you like, with the UK, and they're all trying to put in place their trade deals, and they're doing the same with the EU. And Australia's no different, we're doing the same. We're trying to make sure that we get the best deal out of both markets now. Instead of looking at it as one unified market, we've got to re-strategise and look them through.
Well, that's right, and our government's busy at the moment trying to negotiate agreements with both zones now. So the EU as a whole, and now the UK as well. So there's opportunity, in that regard for Australia and for Australian businesses to perhaps leverage off the scenario that's presented itself.
Yeah, and really just sort of navigate that a bit better. And that leads me into one of the topics I wanted to engage both of you with, is that if you're an SME and you want to start, or you've already started doing business internationally and globally, gone are the days where you need to have massive capital, massive resources, a huge team of people around you. I see so many companies, such great, innovative young brands, and they're really kicking goals from a domestic point of view, but they can really ramp up from a global perspective. So I wanted to sort of open up the panel discussion around SMEs in trade, and it's so much easier and better if they can actually bolt on a team of experts around them. And the analogy that comes to mind for me is, like Henry Ford used to say, well, I don't need to know everything, I just want to employ the people who do.
Yes.
And that's a really powerful analogy when it comes to business, but especially in international business, because you've got so many variables around you. So from a currency point of view, I mean, if I'm focusing on my product, and that product might be some sort of widget, that's what I'm working on. We've got the R&D, trying to work out how to get it better, how to package it properly. I haven't got time to worry about, well, hang on, what's going to happen with coronavirus and Trump's acquittal, where's my Aussie dollar sit? If I'm trying to sell this to a European market or an Asian market or US, how do I keep track of all this stuff?
Absolutely.
And as the world gets closer and media sort of is so much quicker now, the impacts of these currency fluctuations and economical fluctuations are so rapid that in the past, again, you'd have your own finance team in a big corporation. I used to work for a big Japanese trading company when I was quite younger, a lot younger, quite a while ago I was going to say. And we had our own finance team. They were watching the markets, and back in those days we used to have telex machines. That's how old I am. But these days, even the big companies are outsourcing to experts such as AFEX and trying to find out, we're just going to focus on our core business. Let's plug into the best players. And it could be, if you look at a typical business functionalities, you've got marketing, sales, and that's where this whole social media platform comes in, and how you can leverage your personal brand, make sure that trust, the whole exposure around, R&D, innovation, and testimonials, case studies can be used through LinkedIn and really powerfully. Then you look at the operational factors where you're outsourcing things like the warehousing, transport, logistics, even labour. These days, I can have a fully fledged international business and be an operation of 2 people, and you can be quite successful at it.
Yep.
In many ways, more successful at it. You don't have the headaches. You're not trying to be an expert in all fields. So I wanted to, again, sort of pick both of your brains. If you've come across case studies or you've seen a bit of a trend where even the bigger companies, but especially SMEs, have woken up to that fact, thinking, well, hang on, I don't need to be jack of all trades. I can focus on my widget, and I'm going to outsource my expertise or upskill to people who can actually give us that navigation and guidance. Same with currency exchange, and how do I de-risk the business in many ways in Australia, we are a high risk business country, so with litigation, health and safety, we're quite. It is quite difficult to do business in Australia in many ways compared to some other markets.
High wages,
high labour cost
of warehouses,
real estate, all that sort of stuff. So I'll start with you, Megan. Have you seen more people sort of wake up to the benefits of outsourcing?
The benefits of outsourcing, but also the benefits of it not having to be about the leader of the organisation having the voice.
Yep.
There was a report done in 2019 by Edelman around trust, and 3/4 of the respondents indicated that they want to hear more from business leaders to establish trust in an organisation. But there's also been a huge movement towards micro-niching.
Yeah.
Both within organisations and outside. So the time has come for the subject matter experts in your team to step forward, take a little bit of that pressure off the leaders, and emphasise, really hone in on what it is that the audience wants to know more about. And I think that's something that is going to continue. It's grown enormously.
Yeah, I agree. I think that people, even internally within an organisation, they're checking out their own colleagues on LinkedIn. They're trying to understand, well, how do I keep up with that? Or they may have just got a promotion and think, oh yeah, that's great. I didn't hear that through the grapevine, because the water cooler days, so to speak, are less and less. Everyone's too busy on their phones or laptops, or you don't have that same sort of face-to-face or personal interaction anymore within an office even.
No, but people think that they know you because of social.
Yeah.
You may never have met face to face.
True.
And I've seen that play out myself,
Yep.
walking down the street, and people think that they know me simply because they've seen a video on LinkedIn, which is amazing from a personal brand perspective.
Yeah, fantastic.
But it makes you very aware that you've got to be congruent, and you don't show up on LinkedIn as somebody that you're not in real life.
Yeah, understood. Sure.
Yeah.
And James, obviously, it's almost comical that so many companies that I talk to, especially the bigger ones, SMEs are probably better at it in my mind, and I'll get to what I'm talking about, is that you see stuff like the coronavirus and you think, oh no, I'm good with my currencies, I know what I'm up to. And then stuff like this happens. I think, I wish I had listened to thinking about a strategy where I've got some forward covers, I've got some de-risk around the business. Yeah. And it's always too late. The bigger boys are actually worse at it than the SME. The SMEs are hungry to learn. They really appreciate the advice that you type of guys give. And they think, oh yeah, well, I want to be sort of bolted onto the experts in the field. Whereas the bigger companies that I find they're a little bit arrogant, to be blunt. They think that they don't need that expert advice until it's too late. They think, oh well, I've just lost a whole range of profitability of that shipment because this whole coronavirus is coming in, and the dollar's gone from 68 to 62.
Yeah, sure. No, you see examples of that, of course. I think with SMEs particularly, and you're aware of this yourself, Lawrence, through your own involvement in business, that SMEs, where you've got maybe a handful of people working within a business, they're wearing so many different hats at any one point in time that they just can't focus on a lot of the things that we're talking about now, like we're talking FX with myself, or if it's LinkedIn and marketing here with Megan as well, that they just don't have time to focus on. So they rely on experts in those fields to be able to provide consultancy, advice, execution if it's coming to the markets on when to buy, when to sell. So a business like ours, that's our bread and butter, is working with SMEs, with corporates. But even to your example, it could be some large, international, multinational companies as well that we do work with. It's being able to provide that advice to their personnel that they're not ordinarily able to do themselves. And because if we're dealing with people in the finance department, as an example, they might be busy, coordinating audits, or it could be end of financial year, end of month reporting. There's a lot of things that go on in the background, and foreign currency, whilst it has a very important impact on a business, given if it's an importing company, that's their biggest expense, the cost of goods sold, they just don't necessarily have the time to sit down and every day of the week, every day of the month to be focusing on what's going on in the markets. Whereas that's what we do. We sit behind desks with charts everywhere, and we're looking at all the fundamentals and what's driving the currency. Sounds a bit boring, I know, but that's what we do.
You're
right?
not making
That's
it sexy,
that's our expertise. So if we can share that expertise with our clients and prospective clients as well, then it's only going to better the decision-making processes by those businesses at the end of the day. And that's what we're here to do, is to help businesses make informed decisions on how they should conduct their FX purchases or sales, and importantly, making sure that the strategy they implement aligns with how their business operates. Often there's a big misalignment, and that just creates unnecessary risk for a business. And if they're an SME and they don't have the personnel to to be able to equip themselves to be able to prevent those risks from occurring, then they're at high risk.
And to me, that key word there, emphasis on unnecessary. It's the other part of this trend that I've seen especially over the last 2 to 3 years, and increasingly so, is not just going to general outsourcers, but to specialist practitioners. So what I mean by that is, I'll use your scenario there, James. So I can be with one of the big 4 banks, and they might be able to do all my letters of credit, all sort of stuff, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're my best FX provider. So what more and more companies are doing, both small and large, is that they're hand-picking which are best in each of their fields. So they might say, look, I'm happy with my normal bank, but that doesn't mean they're going to give me the best deal out of Forex. Or I'm happy with my warehouse provider, that doesn't necessarily mean they're the right ones to do my transport. Same with the labour. You can have people running the warehouse, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're the ones who are going to unpack the containers, because they're not as fast as specialist outsourcers. So this whole level of speciality, the analogy thinking about, well, instead of going to your GP to get all you'll just go for a general checkup. You get your blood works done every 6 months or whatever, and then you say, well, might need to go and get other things done with specialists. And that's what's happening now, I believe, in international trade and supply chain, is that especially SMEs, but even the big boys, are starting to wake up to the benefits of niche specialities. It's really, because everyone, if you can make a 1 or 2% impact, and you've got, as you said, the bread and butter type of focus, the banks are trying to do a lot of stuff for their clients, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they can provide the full high level of service across all those suite of products. And it's the same with other supply chain providers as well. So you've got specialists doing e-com, you've got specialists doing last mile fulfillment, specialist consolidation services, and I think that's again what I see in the social media part is people are trying to, in this whole saturated sort of platform, one of the biggest things that what appeals to me when I look at the feed is that if there is someone doing a specialty service, that gets my attention, because others are pretty much brand focused. Whereas if I say, okay, well, this is all we do, this is what we want to be the best at in this field, I take it. I take more attention of that. So is that something that you see as well, Megan? That
It's huge.
Yeah.
It really is. And I think businesses, particularly SMEs, because they're conscious of having to wear many hats, there's an opportunity there to hone in and address a specific need at a deep level.
Yep.
Not to just try to be all things to all people.
Great.
And from the specialist perspective,
Yep.
you know, they have a rich knowledge that you just can't have if you're trying to be all things to
That's
all
right.
people.
You can't be everything to everyone, and that specialty focus is really getting sharper in view, and people are really drawn to that. So thank you both for tapping into that. We're just going to cut to another break, and after the break we'll just wrap up and talk about some things that are coming up for the next week and some events as well. So come back and join us after this break. We'll wrap up for our last segment on import-export this week.
On Ticker, this is Import Export with Lawrence Christophels.
To join us again, you're watching Import Export on Ticker. I'm Lawrence Christophels and joined today with Megan Edwards and James King from AFEX. So we've had some great discussion this morning, but just to wrap up, we've got some things that I want to obviously make the audience aware of coming up this week and in the next couple of weeks with some fantastic events around the country. So Megan, I'm going to start with you. You've obviously, you know, we've just touched the tip of the iceberg about your level of expertise, how powerful and important it is to really be on LinkedIn and use it properly, correctly. We don't have a choice. So I know you run a range of bespoke not one-on-one workshops, but group workshops that go for the whole day. Do you want to tell the audience a bit more about that?
Sure. Yes, it is an all day, and even then that's only scratching the surface. But we're honing in on content because that is the core of your presence on LinkedIn, and we're walking you through how to support the back end.
Great.
You know, those direct dialogue connections, because you can't have one without the other. So it's very strategic. It's not a nuts and bolts, push the button kind of course. It's about implementing a strategy that's going to support your business and fit into your broader marketing strategy.
Yeah, and I've heard you're a bit of a taskmaster. You make sure they do all the work.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, that's great. I'll definitely encourage that. So the next one, when's that coming up?
25th of February.
In Melbourne?
Yes.
Great. Okay, and we had an event for the viewers who couldn't get there yesterday. We had a fantastic event here in Melbourne on LinkedIn. Megan was our expert speaker. So back to back. Thank you for joining us today on the show. But we had some fantastic feedback from the 50 or so people who were there in the room. They had some amazing penny drop moments about what they should be doing with LinkedIn, and that was just a 10-minute discussion. So the full day workshop, I can only imagine, is just going to be delving right into ringing the towel on LinkedIn. So
I just want people to feel that it's not scary. That it's a powerful business tool, and it's not a Facebook.
Great. Well, we are repeating that same event. It's a networking event and a snippet into what you should be doing with LinkedIn. That's on the 18th of February at the Endeavour Tap Rooms in the Rocks in Sydney on the 18th of February. So get along to that. We had a great one here last night in Melbourne, and we're replicating that same event. We also include a brand new corporate headshot. So not only will you get to hear about what you should be doing on LinkedIn, but we'll have a photographer on hand to actually do a whole new photograph of yourself for LinkedIn, so you've got a fresh 2020 corporate picture as well for the profile. And James, I wanted to bring you in as well. We're working on a really fantastic event, which is so timely when we're talking about these type of things we've discussed this morning. Is that in partnership with AFEX, we're doing the CFO Roundtable coming up, and that kicks off on the 3rd of March, I believe, here in Melbourne.
Correct. Yes. Park Hyatt, I believe.
Yep.
We thought it was an opportunity for us to branch out to not only our existing customers, but also to prospective businesses that we're looking to do business with in the near future, but by bringing together CFOs and potentially some directors as well of businesses. Often it can be a bit of a lonely job when you're near the top there, and being able to sound ideas of people internally is not necessarily an easy thing to do. So we thought we'd create an event where we can get together a bunch of CFOs and directors potentially that can then act as a sounding board with one another. They can network, they can listen to some of the challenges that businesses are facing in different industries, different sectors, get some insights into what they're doing well, where they're looking to improve, and also we've also got a special guest as well, Stephen Bartholomew's. I believe you might be about to talk a little bit more about shortly, Lawrence. But we're fortunate to have the expertise of Stephen. He'll be able to present a little bit on what's driving markets, etc., from his perspective as a leading journalist, in the marketplace. So we're really looking forward to the event. Yeah,
look, I really love the idea of the round table, because it just opens up people to share their experiences across different sectors, as you mentioned, James. I mean, I think that even in those LinkedIn workshops, I'm sure people come from different segments, and I've seen it firsthand where you'll have an agribusiness talking to a tech business, and you'll have a food producer talking to a tech, another high-end tech product manufacturer. But they're actually learning from each other just by being in the same room, bouncing those ideas off. And the similarities are quite uncanny. They don't realise it because, as you say, they're sort of blinkered in their day-to-day. But when they actually sit around the table, bounce off some ideas, have experts who are true experts such as yourself and Stephen in the room, sort of giving them some tips and advice about what's happening, what's impacting on the market, they can all take that away and then bring that expertise back in-house to their business as an ongoing process. So it's really powerful. And Stephen Bartholomew is, we're really privileged to have him as our keynote speaker, but we'll also be able to have you there as well. So that's, we'll definitely check out our upcoming events through the website, the Australian Trade and Logistics Corporation.com.au. It's a bit of a mouthful, but you can't miss it. And just to wrap up, we also have another fantastic event here in Melbourne coming up this coming Wednesday morning, the 12th of Feb. It's on inventory management and product lifecycle management. So how to get the best out of your inventory control mechanisms and what you should be doing around product lifecycle management, which is increasingly important around how you dispose of your product, how you can actually make sure that you're really monitoring the whole end-to-end life cycle of those products, and because of sustainability and corporate social responsibility as well. So again, that's on the 12th of February here in Melbourne in the CBD. Get along to that if you can. Tickets, there's still a few tickets left for that. But
sounds like a timely event, Lawrence, with what's going on over in China. Well, at the
exactly, moment. So I mean, if you look at, there's always unknowns that affect your supply chain. So making sure you've got the right balance of not having too much stock or not having too little stock. If it's too much stock, you're paying for extra storage. If it's too little stock, you're paying for urgent freight. So there's always a sweet spot that you're trying to manage with the supply chain. And that's what we're discussing and delving into. But we've got to allow those buffers and what we class as weeks of cover or forward cover, similar to Forex, but related to products.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, great. So thanks so much for joining me today, I should say. I'm still in yesterday's mode from our event last night. So this morning, I should say. So thank you, Megan. Really recommend you all get along to her workshops. They're worth their weight in gold. Really great ROI on the investment as well. 25th of Feb, mwords.com.au is the website. James King, you can always catch James quite regularly on a lot of his social media as well. He's one of our proud sponsors with AFEX, or the Australian Trade Logistics Corporation. Get along to the CFO Roundtable, and don't wait for that. If you're finding that you're getting some challenge with currencies at the moment, reach out to AFEX and get in touch.
Absolutely.
Thanks very much, everyone, for joining us again today. Looking forward to seeing you next Thursday. We're actually doing a shift change, so Thursday's 10 o'clock from now on, and look forward to joining you there on Import Export next week. Thank you.
This is Ticker, your new source for news.